British Columbia is world-renowned for its natural beauty, diverse communities, and thriving culture. It's also known for being in the grips of a housing affordability crisis decades in the making, which has been compounded by a poison drug crisis and by the COVID-19 pandemic. The province has an ambitious plan to address the crisis through the largest investment in housing affordability in BC's history. Tasked with building tens of thousands of homes in hundreds of communities is BC Housing, the province's agency responsible for developing, managing, and administering a wide range of subsidized housing and homelessness services across the province. BC Housing doesn't do this alone. To address the challenge, they're working with hundreds of partners. In this podcast, you'll get to hear from those delivering innovative and exciting affordable housing solutions. I'm Sarah from BC Housing, and this is Let's Talk Housing. Over the past few years, BC Housing has worked with partners to move more than 1,000 people from major encampments in communities around the province, including Surrey, Nanaimo, Vancouver, and Victoria. The vast majority of these people who were living in the tent cities remain housed today, thanks to the work of many people, two of whom are joining us on the podcast. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are recording this podcast on the ancestral homelands of hundreds of Indigenous peoples and nations across British Columbia, each with their own unique traditions and history. Today, I am on the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, who have been the caretakers of these lands for thousands of years. We offer our respect to their peoples, past and present. Also, in full transparency, this episode is being recorded in October 2021 and reflects the issues at that time. Joining us on Let's Talk Housing today is Heidi Hartman, BC Housing's Executive Director for Supportive Housing and Homelessness Operations, who has worked with partners to support people experiencing and leaving homelessness in cities around the province, including in Victoria. Also joining us is Janice Abbott, CEO of Itera Women's Resource Society, a nonprofit housing provider that oversees the management of several supportive housing buildings. Her team also provides outreach services to women in the community facing homelessness. She has worked closely on several encampments over the years. Thank you both for joining us on Let's Talk Housing today. Janice, can you start by sharing with our listeners a little bit about Itera's history and the approach that you take to working with community?
Sure, thank you. And I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking on the stolen and unceded territories of the Squamish and Lillooet Nation. So I'm honored to be here and glad to acknowledge both of those nations. So Itera Women's Resource Society has been around for almost 40 years. We operate at this point in time, about 40 supportive housing buildings, mostly in the downtown east side of Vancouver, but also in downtown Vancouver and in East Vancouver and Surrey. We have been involved mostly in the ends of the encampment, so providing housing opportunities for folks who are leaving the camps. And our services are low barrier, so we provide access to folks who have animals and belongings and other things that maybe prevent them from getting into traditional rental housing.
Thank you, Janice. And as you mentioned, Itera provides services to folks living in encampments. Can you help us understand some of the reasons why people might end up experiencing homelessness and living in an encampment?
Yeah, I think, and based on conversations with some of the folks that we work alongside, there are lots of complex reasons why people end up outside. Sometimes it's about community or where their communities are. Sometimes it's because sort of more mainstream landlords or rental properties refuse to house them. Sometimes it's because it's for really simple reasons, because the places where they live are too hot, too cold, uncomfortable for them. They maybe got into conflict with one of their neighbors or some of their neighbors, or conflict with somebody. So I think there's a lot of reasons why people end up outside, and often because it's where they feel like they belong. at that moment.
Heidi, we know that there are as many paths into homelessness as there are people who find themselves sleeping on the streets, and every one of them has their own unique story. Can you help explain for people who are listening why someone who finds themselves experiencing homelessness might choose to sleep outside rather than taking a space in a shelter?
Homelessness, as Janice says, is so very complex, and the reasons people are homeless, their journeys are all very different, and therefore the reasons they're outside may be different as well. They may have experienced trauma or challenges. A congregate shelter living space just may not be appropriate for them. And that's where the relationship and the connections through outreach like Itera and nonprofits around the province are so really key to support people. An offer of housing, it may take several meetings and building a strong relationship. Those connections is the better way to describe it. It's about connecting, getting to know people, and finding out what their housing needs are and how we can support them to make that transition.
Janice, Heidi spoke about the importance of building connections. Can you tell us about how Itera built connection with the residents of Strathcona Park, which at one point was Canada's largest encampment with more than 450 tents?
Yeah, so I think one of the keys to how well the decampment at Strathcona worked was having our staff in there well before the camp was dismantled. So we set up a warming tent at just on the outside of Strathcona Park because we didn't want to be in people's space. So we were just on the other side of the park boundary. We had, in addition to providing a safe using space, we had hot coffee, we had a warming tent, we had food, we had staff who were there and able to talk with and make connections with the people who were living in Strathcona Park. So finding a little bit about them, where they hope to go. And we did everything in that warming tent from, like I say, providing food to setting up a table where people played chess and checkers all day. So it was about 3 or 4 months of being able to get to know and build relationships with the folks who were living in the park in an effort to better understand where they would like to go leaving the park.
Janice, Itera still has relationships with people who were in the encampment. How has Itera approached building relationships with people as they move from being outdoors to living inside?
So, it's not an easy process. People have a lot of reasons not to trust the system, especially people who are racialized or people who have experienced a lot of violence at the hands of the system, people who have been traumatized by the system. So even sort of the effort that went into developing those relationships in the warming tent, they get tested when people move inside. People expect that based on their lived experience, they expect to be evicted. So there's a lot of negotiating what living inside looks like because people expect to be excluded. And so the relationship building is ongoing, and the relationships are constantly tested. And there needs to be a lot of patience and a lot of space for mistakes to be made. And by mistakes, I mean things like floods and fires. And, you really have to work with folks because they're expecting to be excluded. And you have to prove to people that they can trust you. And that you're not going to exclude them from housing.
Crucial to maintaining these relationships has been BC's approach to moving people indoors with minimal use of force, which is very different from many other jurisdictions where there's been a very heavy police presence. Can you talk about the process to clear an encampment without having to rely on use of force?
I think it's always important to honor the different communities and what's works, because each of the camps looks a bit different. But again, it really goes to relationships and, going to the camp, building those relationships of trust, bringing the different partners in, as Jan has shared, the warming tent with the meals, bringing people together, honoring the community that's there. In Victoria, we ensured that there was regular meetings with the campers, and with sometimes it was the fire department, it was the police, but having that respectful relationship and connection is just really key to be able to. Encampment is a difficult word for me. I like to be able to frame it as moving people inside, and recognizing it's not going to be something that happens over a day or two. It's about relying on that relationship, building that relationship, and bringing the appropriate partners in. It may not be a lead agency per se. It's really a person-focused approach. So who best connects with that person, and who can help transition them to the housing solution that they'll be moving to, for that continuity that Janice talks about, that continuity of relationships, so that trust can be built over time.
You've raised a key point, Heidi, about the importance of a person-focused approach. Janice, can you share with us more about the partners Itera worked with in Strathcona to be able to deliver this kind of person-centered approach to services?
Yeah, and I just want to also make another point. When you adopt a person-centered approach, it's important, I think, to realize that for some people, for whatever reason, they want to be outside. So we continue to have a relationship on an outreach basis with an older man who has zero interest in being inside, and he's found a new place to be where he's been since the camp closed last year. And we visit him at his place outside. And so I think we need to honor, while obviously in our hearts, we want everyone to be inside for all the right reasons. For some people, it doesn't work. And so you have to find a way to honor that as well, and continue to be in relationship with that person and honor what they want. So at the warming tent at Strathcona, there were a variety of partners who worked there. So we worked closely with PHS, who had outreach workers at Strathcona Park for the duration of the encampment there, and already had relationships with some of the campers and some of the communities at the park. So they were instrumental. Those outreach workers were instrumental in helping us get to know some of the campers and some of the uniqueness of the communities there. We also worked very closely with BC Housing. Obviously, BC Housing had staff and outreach workers in the park. We worked with the City of Vancouver. We worked with the fire department. We worked with the Parks Department. We did our best to work with the VPD in a way that was respectful of the community. And we worked with other not-for-profits. So there were, and with health. So there were a lot of folks on site offering support and being in conversation, as Heidi mentioned, being in conversation with all of those partners and with the community in an effort to better understand what the community wanted and needed was really important to make it work.
Heidi, Janice has talked about the importance of partners in Strathcona Park in Vancouver. Can you tell us about how BC Housing works with partners in Victoria, including through the Homeless Action Response Team?
We've seen such success with that model of the HART, or the Homeless Action Response Team, because it's a really integrated approach. And again, it just has those elements of person-focused approach. That team consists of outreach providers, including Indigenous partners, the bylaws, city bylaws, and police and island health. And what we do is on a regular basis, there is a weekly meeting to identify where we're seeing small encampments And we want to really be proactive and connect with people. We've had circumstances through Heart where we found senior citizens in a park who were newly homeless. So that integrated team was able to connect with them, get them housing application, and take immediate response to finding a sheltering solution with them. And I can't say enough about collaboration and integration. When we developed this team, there was concern about the police being there and what that looked like. But it's really about the police officer and the personality attached to it. And we've seen that with bylaws as well. But they are able to do their work in a really respectful and supportive way. And we've had tremendous success in being able to take immediate action when we find new folks on the street, and hopefully, prevent that cycle of long-term homelessness. We're able to make shelter referrals. I should mention that the Ministry of Social Development workers are also a part of that. So they have the community integration workers there as well. So, upon meeting somebody, they can do income assistance applications. We can do supportive housing applications, or sometimes it's a rent supplement application. But it's really that, I don't always like to use the word wraparound, but that really supportive team around people. And again, just really focusing on the person. It's not a one size fits all. It's really honoring the person and what their circumstances are and why their journey to homelessness has occurred.
We know the vast majority of people that we've moved indoors from these encampments remain inside, but we also know that some folks do end up back on the street. Janice, can you talk about what you think needs to change so that everyone who moves indoors has what they need to live the healthy, stable life that they would like?
Yeah, so it's a complex answer. I mean, if I were going to go to the heart of it, I would quote Frederick Douglass and say that it's easier to build strong children than it is to fix broken adults. And so if we want to talk about solutions to homelessness, we have to talk about fundamental changes to the child welfare system. Stop apprehending or stealing people's children. Providing enough food and a roof over children's heads and access to education, all of those things that build strong and healthy adults. So it's a kind of a long, complex question. Once people are outside, I think it's important to remember that no matter how carefully we manage decampments, no matter how good our intentions are, that the encampment itself is traumatizing for lots of folks. And I think when you get people inside, you need to not make the mistake that for everybody that's the end of the road, that their life is suddenly awesome because they have a room to live in with a roof over their heads. We need a safe supply. We need the decriminalization of drugs, decriminalization of sex work. We need an end to poverty. And so when you have all of those things, and most folks at the end of the day want their own kitchen and want their own bathroom. So it's about adequate, affordable housing as well. So it's a long, complex question. And a big part of it is doing our best not to create trauma in the first place.
That's such important context. Heidi, as Janice has just pointed out, housing is only one part of a very complex solution. So BC Housing has 21,000 homes built or underway, and we still have hundreds of people in these encampments. We still have thousands of people that are experiencing homelessness. When you look ahead, how is BC Housing working with partners to really turn the tide and provide some of the solutions that people so desperately need?
Janice identified it. It's that prevention piece. We absolutely, BC Housing and the province have been so responsive in building housing, but we need more. And building is one of the solutions, but a key piece of that is that prevention. The supports for youth leaving care, that continuity. Again, it's that person-focused approach. That's key to what we do. Also, adequate health services, through the decampment and moving people in from the parks in Victoria into the sheltering solutions. We've seen the success of having health services on site. Again, it takes time for people to connect to them, but if they're available and they have access, it's so beneficial. We hear stories, and I've seen it when I go to the sites, and the difference in people's appearance once they get a roof over their head, they're having regular meals, and they're getting the medical attention they need. All those are really keys. Housing is part of the solution, but there's so many other elements that are needed to be able to support folks in sheltering solutions to be successful, especially when we're dealing with situations of trauma, supporting people through that.
This has been a really important conversation. I'd like to thank Janice Abbott and Heidi Hartman for joining us on Let's Talk Housing. Let's talk again soon. To learn how to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit our website, bchousing.org. You can also call us at 1-800-257-7756. That's 1-800-257-7756.